2 summers ago, on my way home from an out-of-town day trip for my son's birthday party, we went to a water park and decided to go to dinner in this really small town after getting slightly lost due to Google Maps' crappy directions. Something happened that I'll never forget. After dinner, we noticed across the street was a county fair, so we checked it out for fun. It was getting dark, and the fair was nearly over, but we caught a tractor pull that was about to begin. We'd never been to one, so we thought it might be a fun way to top off the birthday trip. We sat on the bleachers and watched for a while. There were a lot of families there watching, and also some drunk people as well. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had my 16-year-old son with me, and a good friend of mine who is a strong guy, so I felt safe. We decided to leave the fair before the event was over, so as not to be on the road at night with the drunks. We walked back to the restaurant, which was now closed, and got into my car and set off for home. Backtracking using Google Maps directions, we got on the road that I recognized would get us back home. I noticed that as soon as we pulled out of the restaurant, there was a car behind me, the only other car on the road, as most of the town's inhabitants were most likely at the fair or at home. The car followed us onto the road we took to get home, which I found odd because it was a desolate back hilly road with a wooded area on either side. I thought maybe they too were from out of town and were using the same shortcut to get to the interstate, as it was summer and many people road trip. I still felt uneasy about it, but decided to just get off this podunk road and onto the interstate as soon as possible. As we were driving on this hilly back road, it was fully dark outside, and I kept it easy for fear of a deer running out in front of us. The car stayed right behind me. I slowed way down, hoping he would be annoyed enough to pass me for going too slow. Instead, he drove right up on my ass, tailgating me. I could see that it was only one person in the car, and the windows were tinted. I dared to speed up, wanting to get on a main road or interstate as soon as I could. He stayed right behind me, going as fast or slow as I was, not bothering to get off my bumper. I knew without a doubt we were being harassed now. I was getting scared. I had my son in the back seat. It was his birthday. This was unfair, and I kicked myself for going to the tractor pull. Of course, I could not have predicted this craziness. After what seemed like ages, we got onto the interstate. I had hoped it was just some local jerk who wanted to scare some city folks, but I somehow knew it was not that simple. As I feared, he followed us onto the interstate. Even on the interstate, he tailgated us. I slowed down initially, hoping in futility that he'd pass us. No luck. I sped way up. He caught up and stayed too close. Unfortunately, the interstate was quiet on our side. I had no choice but to keep going. My friend was very angry and ready to fight if necessary, but I wanted no part of meeting this guy face to face, especially with my birthday boy in the back seat. I just kept going and prayed not to get a flat tire. At one point, I got scared enough to lay on the horn while driving, hoping the noise would dissuade him. It worked. He pulled over on the shoulder, and I saw his headlights turn off. I was relieved at first, but we found it odd that he killed the lights. After that, we sped up, and I was flying for home. The sooner, the better. About 15 minutes passed in blissful uneventfulness. We talked about how scary that whole ordeal was, and eventually started feeling relieved to put it all behind us. Literally, we were about 25 minutes from home, and there were a couple of vehicles here and there, which made us feel less alone on the road. At one point when the cars thinned out and we were once again alone on the road, something happened that I could not believe. Right next to us, and slightly behind us, headlights, bright, burst on. He had been following us that whole time, with his lights off, staying carefully behind us and waiting for his chance to scare and surprise us. I almost started crying, but at this point, I was too angry. This guy has been following us for an hour now. Far ahead of us, I saw the taillights of a semi. I sped up quickly, with the stranger in the car next to me trying to pace us from the fast lane. I think he realized that I was trying to catch up with the semi. So for the first time in this insane chase, he did something truly dangerous and swerved at my rear panel. A pit maneuver, trying to push us off the road, I sped ahead and missed him, clipping me by inches. I finally reached the semi-driver and got close, hugging the back of his truck as much as I dared and leaving no room for this jerk to cut me off. We went this way for a little while. Finally, and I truly believe this semi-driver knew something was wrong, because after so long of seeing this crazy driver swerving at me and trying to get in front of me as I would not let him over, the semi-driver did something I will forever appreciate him for. He swerved over into the fast lane and dangerously cut off the stranger's car and then tapped his brakes. I took it as my cue to speed ahead from the slow lane and try to lose this creep. I sped up to 85, 90. My hometown was straight ahead. I took a sharp left onto a back street that led to a main road and stopped in a busy, well-lit gas station. Luckily, there was a cop there. My friend got out and explained the whole situation to the officer, and he called for other cars to search for this guy. We left the gas station after calling a friend to follow me to a parking lot, where I stowed my car overnight because I did not want the guy to possibly find my house by recognizing the car. I watched my back for quite some time after that. I always noticed that make and model of car in white if I saw one on the streets. Thank goodness we got away safely. Now, the most bothersome thing about this story is that the small town where this took place happens to be the hometown of one of the biggest mental health asylums in the Midwest. This thought has kept me awake more than one night, and I still check the papers for stories of escapees.
My cousin and I decided to go up a few hours north for a nice winter cabin weekend. It went great. Nothing creepy at all. On our final day, we packed up at 6 a.m. and hopped in the car to get an early start on the 5-hour drive we had ahead of us. It was a foggy morning, not actively snowing, but previous snowfalls had piled up quite a bit, making the drive a little risky in the dark early hours of the morning. My cousin was driving, and we're chatting and listening to podcasts, not too aware of our surroundings. We were about 20 minutes into the drive when, unfortunately, the car skidded off the road a little, damn you black ice, and we very slightly grazed a tree. We got out to take a look, and by some miracle, there was no damage or anything on the car. As my cousin and I started to laugh with relief, I shielded my eyes due to some idiot with their crazy high beams coming up behind us. "So obnoxious," my cousin laughed, beginning to open her door to step back in, when the blinding headlights honked and continued to blare as they approached us. My cousin and I exchanged confused glances but quickly hopped back into the car. The car began to slow down, and we were able to see a man in the driver's seat. He finally took his hand off the horn and pulled up right next to my cousin's car, which was really dumb because we were off the road and it was crazy slippery. He rolled down his window and motioned for my cousin to do the same. We figured it was fine since he was still inside his car and we were in ours. I know, probably still a stupid move. "Hey there, ladies, in a rush this morning?" He laughed. Not really, just trying to get home. Can we help you with something?" My cousin replied with a totally stone-cold poker face. "Oh no, I just noticed you dropped something about 2 kilometers back. It fell out of your trunk." My cousin turned to look at me. "Did you shut the trunk when we left?" "Yeah, dude, obviously," I replied. And knowing the way the car is shaped, we would have seen and definitely heard an open trunk. "No thanks, sir. I think you might have us mixed up with someone," my cousin said, and immediately rolled up her window. This man just gave off bad vibes. He starts blaring his horn again and motioning for us to roll down the window. My cousin rolls it down again and sees him holding up some women's underwear and smiling. "See? This look familiar?" I can literally remember the exact tone with which he said that. "No thanks, sir. You have a great day now." My cousin quickly rolled up her window again and floored it, quickly hopping back on the road, and thankfully the man was either taken aback or just gave up, and we didn't see him for the next hour or so. My cousin and I were both a little shaken up, but tried to laugh it off since we were safe and hadn't seen his car follow us or anything. About 2 hours into our trip, we got off at an exit to fill up gas and grab some breakfast at a Starbucks. My cousin and I mobile ordered, and I was going to quickly run in to grab our food and drinks. It had started snowing at this point, and while the sun had been up for a little bit, it was still foggy and gloomy, making it hard to see the surroundings. I ran in, and as I reached for our food, someone's arm reached over mine to grab a napkin, and I instantly flinched back. When I looked up, I truly almost shat myself. It was the fucking man. Despite him never getting out of the car, he did have his lights on and I was able to get a clear view of his face. It was him, I was sure. Look at us, just like old friends. He smiled at me. I immediately looked down, grabbed my food, and started walking out of the store. As I left, I heard him talking to the barista saying, "See that beauty queen? That's my beauty queen." What the hell? I almost had tears in my eyes because I was so terrified. I power walked back to the car, almost tripping outside because I was so scared and not walking like a normal person. I hopped in and screamed, "We need to get the hell back on the road. He's inside the fucking Starbucks." My cousin started laughing, thinking I was pranking her, but she quickly realized that was not the case when the man walked out of the Starbucks a few seconds later, with no drink or food in hand, walking straight towards our car, waving at us. My cousin quickly started to turn the car on. When the man reached into his pocket, I genuinely thought he would pull out a weapon, holding up the underwear he had before. Thankfully, my cousin took no time in backing out of there and speeding back onto the highway. We both were freaking out at this point, not sure how he ended up at the same stop as us, despite us not seeing him behind us at all. He could have taken some sort of back roads we didn't know about, but it would have taken him much longer than us to get there, unless he was trailing behind. I don't know. We quickly tried to find an alternate route on our Maps app, and thankfully there was one that made us go through some local roads, which we hoped might help. Of course, with our luck, as we were going through a smaller town, I felt the car getting gradually lower on my side. We pulled over at a well-lit gas station and realized we were losing air in one of the tires. We were both too scared to get out, but figured if we went out together it might be less scary. So we did. We filled up the tire with some air and it seemed to be okay. We got back in the car, back on our way. Everything seemed fine until 10 minutes later, when this car seemed to appear out of nowhere directly behind us. My cousin and I looked at each other, having no idea what to do if it were the man. Our suspicions were confirmed when he blared his stupid horn yet again, then quickly swerved off the road to get right next to us, so this time he was on my side. He had his window rolled down and was screaming at us. At this point, I called my brother-in-law, who's a cop. I know I should have called the police directly. It was a stupid move, but in the moment I was trying to justify this as being not that serious. My bro-in-law told us to drive directly to the nearest police station and to call them right away so they would be alert. Literally, as he was instructing me, the creep stopped his car in the side of the snowy, icy road. We were still speeding away, so it quickly got harder and harder to see him. But from what I could make out, he had gotten out of his car and was sitting on the hood, just sitting on the hood of his car in freezing snowy weather. My cousin and I did not want to stop or do anything with about an hour left in our journey. We decided to just book it straight home, and thankfully that was the end of that. I know we made a lot of stupid mistakes that could have potentially had horrible consequences, but I'm super happy we made it out alive and unharmed. I still don't know how he caught up to us seemingly magically, and why he just sat there at the end, but I don't even want to find out at this point.
When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year, my family would pack the car and go on a road trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning. So, around 2 a.m., we crossed into Mexico. And that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more to drive, and I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So, when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us? It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car, shrugged off my mother's tension. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city." And he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car, and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quick. "He's getting closer," my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere with another few hours until daylight. It was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove. And the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more. Like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over! Right in front of the police! Pull over right now, Miguel!" And he did. And the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over, asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us, and taunted us. The policeman took her claim seriously, told us of how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved, until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting.